Last week, we set up your Azure environment. Resource groups created, cost alerts in place, you're ready. Now we build something. Today, we're going to create your first Azure function. By the end of this video, you'll have code running in the cloud that you can call from anywhere, including Business Central. And here's the thing, that would have blown my mind a few years ago. You don't have to be a C# expert to do this. You don't need to be a backend developer. AI can write the code. You just need to understand what functions are and where they fit. That's what this video is about. Let's go. Before we create anything, let me explain what Azure Functions actually are. And to do that, I need to explain serverless. Serverless doesn't mean there's no server. There's always a server running somewhere. Serverless means you don't manage the server. Traditional approach, you set up a server, install an operating system, install your runtime, deploy your code, monitor the server, patch the server, scale the server when traffic increases, pay for the server whenever it's busy or not. Serverless approach, you write code, deploy it, Azure runs it when needed, you pay only when it runs. That's the magic. You don't think about servers. You don't think about scaling. You don't think about infrastructure. You think about code. For PC developers, this is huge. We're not infrastructure people. We don't want to manage Linux boxes or worry about load balancers. We want to write business logic. Azure Functions lets us do exactly that. Think of it like this. A traditional server is like owning a car. You pay for it, whether you're driving it or not. You maintain it, you worry about it. Azure Functions is like a taxi. You call it when you need it, you pay for the ride, then it goes away. For smaller, targeted pieces of code, which is exactly what PC integrations usually need, serverless makes perfect sense. So what is an Azure function specifically? An Azure function is a small piece of code that runs in response to an event. That's it. The event is called a trigger. There are several types. You got a HTTP trigger. Someone makes a web request, your function runs. This is the most common for PC integrations. BC calls a URL, your function responds. Timer trigger. A schedule fires. Your function runs like a cron job. Good for batch processing, cleanup tasks, regular syncs. Queue trigger. A message appears on a queue, your function runs. We'll use this with service buses later. Blob triggers. A file is uploaded to a storage, your function runs. Good for file processing. For PC work, you'll mostly use HTTP triggers and queue triggers. Today, we're focusing on HTTP. Here's what happens with a HTTP trigger function. Something called a URL, could be BC, could be a browser, could be another system. Azure wakes up your function. Your code runs. Your code returns a response. Azure sends the response back. Functions go back to sleep. The function only runs when called. When nobody's calling it, it doesn't exist. You don't pay for the idle time. This is perfect for PC integration scenarios. A validation check that happens once per order. A data enrichment that happens when a customer is created. A notification that fires when inventory is low. Small targeted, event-driven. That's Azure Function. Let's talk money, because I promised no surprises. Azure Functions has two main pricing models. Consumption plan, you pay per execution. First 1 million executions per month are free. After that, it's a tiny fraction of a cent per execution. For learning, you'll never hit 1 million. It's free. For production, a typical B integration doing thousands of calls per day is still basically free. We're talking maybe a few dollars per month. The premium plan, you pay for pre-warmed instances. Functions are always ready. No cold start delay. More expensive, but faster response times. For learning and most BC scenarios, consumption plan is fine. Here's the bottom line. For everything we do in this series, Azure Functions will cost you essentially nothing. The free tier is generous. You get to production workloads with higher volumes or strict latency requirements, you might consider premium. But that's a problem for a future you. Let's build something. So let's create our Azure function. So up here, I have something called function app. If you don't have that one, you can of course always search for it. and it should also come here. And let's create a new one. And here you have the different plans. Now, as I said, I'm going to use consumption. You could choose one of the other ones. I think this flex consumption is also a way to go. But personally, I always choose consumption. Then you choose your subscription, your resource group. And here I'm going to use the new resource group that I created, of course. And here we give our function a name. Now, the name we're giving here is not really the function itself. It's the container of the function app. So that means you shouldn't call this one like get sales orders, because get sales orders is going to be a function inside this function app. So I'm going to call mine BC Learning Func Dennis. I'm going to use the operating system Windows. As my run stack, I'm going to use .NET. And here I'm going to use the .NET 10 LTS. Now, for those who don't know what LTS stands for, it stands for long-term support. So that means that you should always choose an LTS version of whatever library you're choosing here for the .NET. So, for example, if there's coming an 11, that most probably won't be an LTS, so you should still use number 10. It's just so you don't have to keep on upgrading your functions. Here we choose the region, and again, I'm going to choose West Europe, because that's the one that's closest to me. And then I'm just going to press View and Create. And I'm going to create. And this is going to take a couple of minutes. Because what it's doing right now is it's creating the application insights, and it's creating a storage account, and it's creating a lot of things behind the scenes, and of course deploying this to one of Microsoft's servers. So everything is getting set up for me. And now it's done. Then I can go to Resource. And this is our Azure Function container, as I said. Down here will be the different functions that we are creating, but they're all stored inside this function app container. Now, to develop these functions, as you can see, you can either use Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, or you can use CLI or other editors if you want. Now, personally, I normally use Visual Studio because it's much easier to get running, but it does require you to have either a Visual Studio license if you're using this professionally, or of course you can also download the community edition, which is free, but you're not allowed to use it for enterprise use. At least there are some terms you have to read up on if you're going to use those. So I'm going to use VS Code because that's the one most of us know, because that's what we also use, right, for BC development. Then we can press here to actually see how to get things started. So if we run through this documentation, you can see you're going to have to set a little bit of things up for this to run in Visual Studio Code. You need to install Visual Studio Code, of course. Then we need an Azure Function extension or the Azure Tool extension pack, your Azure subscription, which we already have, right? Then we're going to need some Azure Function core tools, some C# extensions, and some .NET CLI. And then it runs through how you can create your first project. Now, as I said, this is a little bit complicated. This is also why I actually prefer doing things in Visual Studio, because everything is already set up in Visual Studio. You don't have to set all of these things up. But anyway, if we now go to our Visual Studio Code here, and you can see I have installed my Azure Functions. I have my Azure resource. I have a lot of different Azure things here. And that's kind of always the problem, I think, with the Visual Studio Code. You end up having a lot of extensions and never really knowing which one of them you use. Anyway, install the ones that they said, and you should get something like this, where you can connect to your subscriptions. As you can see, I have a couple, but this is the one we're using right now. And you can see here I have my Azure Function. You can then down here say you want to create a new function, and it's going to guide you through the different steps. It's important to, of course, choose that you're running a C# and you're running the latest .NET, which is at this moment is the .10. And I've chosen the HTTP trigger. Once that's done, it will create something like this, a project for you. A very simple HTTP trigger. I've called mine validate customer, which has a run trigger here that does nothing special. It just says the C# HTTP function process request. It's going to log that, and then it says welcome to Azure Function. When you then run this, like you run your BC normal code by pressing F5, for example, for debugging, it will give you a URL here. If you take that URL and post it inside your browser, it's going to tell you, welcome to Azure Functions. And this is where the magic happens in real development. You can edit locally, test locally, debug locally, then deploy to Azure when you're ready. And crucially, you can use AI here. Have Claude write your function that validates a VAT number, or look up a postal code, or calls an external API, paste the code in, test it, deploy it. Now, of course, you can also use your agents directly, like GitHub Copilot, directly inside and make that write it for you, which is what I will normally do, depending on what kind of AI tools you have. You can also use, of course, if you don't have any AI subscriptions, just go to ChatGPT and use their free version. Now, if you want to deploy this, go to your Azure function that we created, right-click on it, and say deploy Azure function. It's going to tell you that when you deploy this, you're going to override whatever is already running on the Azure. And of course, at the moment we don't have anything, so just say apply. But of course, that's like when you're running BC, right? Make sure that the code that you have all the changes, so you don't destroy anything that's already running. Once this has been deployed, you're going to see some check marks in here. Go back to your Azure portal, and you should see your new Azure function. If you go in here, you can see a little bit of information about it. Nothing very special, but you actually have your logs. If you have any logging, invocations, you can see who has run it last time and what has happened. But what we are going to use right now, we go to code and test, you get to your function URL here, and here you can see you have a couple of different functions. The only difference is actually the key at the end of it. As you can see, it has this token code here, and that's the way that we're authenticating right now against our Azure function. Let's just copy this. And as you can see, now I'm actually calling my Azure. And it's going to give me the same result because I didn't change any code, of course. Now, one thing is that in here, you can see in verifications right now, you can't see that I've actually called it. And it's because as you can see, they can go up to 5 minutes delay before any executions are going to be in here. But at some point it will show up here. All right, here's your homework for this week. Create a function app in your resource group using the portal. Install Visual Studio Code and the Azure Function extension and everything else you need, and create a function locally and deploy that to your function app. If you get stuck, drop a comment. I'll help. Next video, we connect this to Business Central. We'll build a function app that BC can call and functions that calls BC. That's when it gets real. But first, get comfortable with creating and deploying functions. That's the skill for this week. And of course, play around with AI. Let AI try to create some fun functions for you. Make a calculator. Make something funny that is HTTP triggered. Go nuts. Again, I would suggest you have GitHub Copilot or something like that running that you can actually just let that AI agent do whatever you want and test it locally and deploy it. Again, you're not going to pay anything because Azure Functions are practically free for what we're using it for right now. Anyway, see you in the next one.